Hi, welcome to the Black Experience Japan's Melanated Files. The purpose of this series is to highlight the black people living in Japan. Who are they? Stay tuned to find out.
My name is Menya. I'm from outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been in Japan for 8 years. Why Japan? The age-old question. When I was in high school, my brother visited Japan after he graduated from high school with his best friend, and I grew up playing video games like every other kid I can imagine. As well as doing a lot of outdoors activities. So I was climbing trees, playing soccer, doing track and field, doing all kinds of stuff like that. But at the same time, I loved games. I loved video games, computer games, like old school computer games. My best friend and I he'd man the shoot button, I'd man the like running and jumping kind of stuff, like old school. When he visited Japan, I was really jealous, but I was still in high school, I couldn't come. So it took me graduating from college to finally decide I want to go somewhere in the world I haven't been before. And then it just happened to be Japan. So I came over then. Taught English for about 1.5 years, and then the rest is a long history, yeah. So now I run a company called Future Fitness. About 1 year and 6 months ago, I started the company here in Japan. It's a kabushiki gaisha, which basically just means like a limited liability company in Japan. Kind of like it's an incorporation, but it's an incorporated company, but it's like a limited liability company. And for years I had wanted to start a company, but it was just kind of big, scary, gray area. How do you start a company? Do you need an office? Do you need this much money in the bank account? All these variables I was unaware of. So I kind of just pieced it together over the course of a couple of years, and eventually I started it. And what we do at Future Fitness is basically we do health consulting, personal training, largely on location PT because there's no facility yet. So it's going to homes or parks or offices or embassies or off-sites or wherever training needs to happen. And then training an individual, 2 people, 6 people, 25 people, it just depends on what the event is. The seminar is a little bit different. They're much more seminar style, so it's usually an individual, group of people, usually a lot of Q&A, some kind of presentation about ergonomics or nutrition or training itself. I have a website, it's called Fit for All, so it's www.fitforall.jp. People can search for my kinds of services there, whether it's one-on-one PT again or health consulting. Online personal training is also something I do, so I've got a dozen or so clients from basically around the world who I create meal plans and training programs for. And then we speak on the phone once a week, and I basically I help track what they're eating, what kind of workouts they're doing, how they're progressing, modify the program, etc. So there are a couple of different programs offered, but that's one of the ones that's kind of growing in popularity, as people kind of just want like a blueprint. What do I do in my condition where I am to make this work? And that's what I can kind of present in a way that is surprisingly effective. It's been really, really good. It's a trending thing right now, but it's become really, it's extremely effective. My experience has been very, very varied. When I came to Japan, I taught English for 1 year and 3 months, and that was an experience. I loved it for the first 6 months, and then I started to hate it, and I couldn't wait to get away. And so when I did, I moved to Tokyo right at the same time. And in Tokyo, my experience went from being a 9 to 5 English teacher to being a freelance model and performer. And so I was performing at least once a week somewhere, whether it's a club or some kind of event in a hotel or something. And at the same time, I was doing lots of freelance modeling work, so lots of commercial jobs. I was on TV doing background dancing and singing and random stuff. And I did that for almost full-time for about a year, almost, like 9 months to a year. Towards the end of that, I realized I needed to do something that was more sustainable, something that gave me more control over my own fate. And then I decided to take one of my other main interests, which were always kind of music and fitness, and then kind of travel down the fitness path, and that's led me to where I am. Being black in Japan, having dreadlocks especially, when people see me now, especially, I'm usually wearing like Nike or some kind of brand. People see me and they think I'm either an athlete or a coach or a trainer or something like that, just usually based on how I'm dressed and how I look, which frankly is actually great because I am actually a coach / trainer. So it makes that conversation pretty easy. People see me and they identify like, oh, this black guy with dreads is involved in athletics. And coincidentally, I am. When I wasn't, so when I was an English teacher, it was a bit different because I didn't want to be perceived that way. I'd want to be perceived like how I am. Like, no, I teach English, I'm a teacher. Like, perceive me as a teacher, but obviously that wasn't people's first impression. So when I moved to Tokyo and got into performing, to use a kind of broad term for the commercials and actual performing, like playing piano and singing and all that stuff. It was actually, it worked well for me in the sense that because I was actually doing what people perceived I was doing, it made it a little bit easier to sell myself as an artist or as a performer. But I completely understand how that could also be discouraging if you're not involved in those things, and everyone that sees you thinks you're an athlete or you're typical media portrayed Black American or Black around the world things, and you don't kind of want that stereotype placed on you. So I think in a sense I've found a way to have that play to my strengths, but I wouldn't call that a good thing by any means. It's just it's the nature of Japan. The best advice I have received is probably that in many regards life is an attitude. Basically, things happen, and it's not that things happen, but it's how we respond to them. So I think if you come upon a situation and you come upon it looking for the best in the situation, you're bound to find the best in the situation. If you're put in a position where if you go into a situation and you're looking for the worst in the situation, I think you're bound to find the worst in the situation. So to relate that to Japan, I think having come to Japan, I had zero expectations. I had neither positive nor negative expectations about Japan. I just kind of wanted to see a different country. And I think I have actively, since the day I got here, looked for the positive in Japan. Thus, I've loved my experience in Japan, and I've tried to make the most of it, and all those other things that have fallen. I think if I'd come here with different expectations or with a pessimistic point of view, my experience in Japan would be completely different. So I'd be looking for the negative things, or I'd be looking for the things to complain about, but that's not really my personality. So I think that advice in itself, life is an attitude, is probably the best advice I've received. Love more, hate less. Be understanding. Life is short. So it sounds kind of silly, but I was born and raised in America, and my mother and father are from Kenya, but I always knew that other countries and other cultures and other ways of life existed, because obviously they exist, but I never really appreciated the fact that there's so much else happening in the world outside the bubble that is America. And I mean, considering my mom and dad were not born or raised in America, you would think that I would know that growing up, but it just, you really get locked into the bubble you're in depending on where you were born and raised. And if I could implore anyone to do anything, it is to really get outside of your comfort zone and recognize that the world is huge and full of all kinds of people and all kinds of cultures and all kinds of ways of life that may not necessarily agree with one another, but they work in their own way, and that's okay. And that difference and that diversity is completely okay.
Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see weekly videos about the Black experience in Japan, feel free to subscribe to this channel. If you know someone that would like to be featured, or if you yourself would like to be featured, send us a message on our Facebook page at The Black Experience Japan, or send us a tweet on Twitter at TheBlackXJP. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.